On behalf of the College of Arts and Letters, it's my pleasure to welcome you here this evening. Michael Schur has been a leader in developing some of the most innovative and hilarious shows on television. He began his career in 1998 writing for Saturday Night Live. Early in his career, he was faced with the ultimate challenge when he was tasked with producing the very first Weekend Update news segment following 9/11. Jimmy Fallon's first joke was, and I quote, "The search for Osama bin Laden is continuing, and authorities believe he may be hiding in a small, dark place completely alone. The CIA is now investigating theaters showing the Mariah Carey movie, Glitter." Schur wrote about this experience. When someone would write a great sketch or joke about something so scary and mystifying, there was a real cathartic laugh that you would get from the audience. As someone known for making upbeat, optimistic sitcoms, in fact, his new sitcom is even titled Sunnyside, Schur has also built a career out of finding humor in the gravity of life's challenges, such as the drudgery of office life with an insensitive, narcissistic boss in the office, the difficulty of improving a community through small-town government in Parks and Rec, and the test of grappling with our awareness of death and moral consequences in The Good Place. In making comedy out of life's provocations, Schur offers a touchstone for television viewers to think through these ideas in their own lives. This also makes him an ideal guest for Notre Dame's College of Arts and Letters, which asks its faculty and students to think hard about the good life and tasks them with finding ways to use the liberal arts to help make the world a better place. It has indeed been our pleasure to host Mike in the college today, and he's been a great sport as we've kept him running around all day long. This morning, he spoke to several hundred freshmen in the God and the Good Life course who are all reading Kant and Aristotle and hatching plans to ensure that they don't end up in the medium place. Over lunch, Mike met with 17 film, television, theater, and philosophy majors who have been taking a deep dive into the production and philosophy behind The Good Place. They've seen every episode multiple times and have had the chance to ask burning questions about what makes the show tick. Every week for the next month, those students will have the chance to learn from other members of the show's production process, from NBC Universal execs, philosophy professors who consult on scripts, and even an expert on fan reception and cult devotion to the show. Tonight, we want to welcome you into that conversation. As with our students, we want to give you a behind-the-scenes peek at how hit shows like this are made, and at the same time, we want to explore the deep ideas about humor, ethics, human relationships, the common good, faith, and the afterlife that bubble under the surface of these shows. In the College of Arts and Letters, we love taking up big, complex, and incredibly important questions like, how do we become better people? How can we work together to improve the world? And examining these kinds of questions from every angle. We are the preeminent place on campus where diverse perspectives and challenging questions are welcomed and where knowledge can be explored for its own sake, whether it comes from ancient writings or hit TV shows. We'll see tonight both philosophy and television offer us a framework for discussion questions that we all wrestle with and can have a hard time talking about, a topic on which Mike Schur can certainly offer an instructive perspective. Finally, this project with Mike has also been evidence of how much fun our faculty and students can have in the process of exploring these questions, especially ones that cross disciplinary lines and enable a variety of scholars to pitch in and share their expertise. Everyone involved in organizing this event, including the logistics team of Chloe Leach, Joanne Norris, Christine Grandy, the God and the Good Life program manager, Justin Christie, the college's academic advancement director, Maria DiPasquale, and the communications and media relations directors, Kate Gary and Amanda Skofstad, have relished the chance to help facilitate this unique opportunity to mix intellect and entertainment in the pursuit of the truth. We will pursue this goal tonight in conversation with Mike Schur, with the assistance of moderator, Associate Dean Peter Holland, who offers his own expertise in this area as Associate Dean for the Arts and McNeil Family Chair in Shakespeare Studies. Peter will now explain the format for tonight's event.
Good evening, everyone. I am indeed, as Dean Mastillo said, Associate Dean Holland, and I must therefore in some way be related to the director of 7 episodes of The Good Place, including the legendary The Trolley Problem in Series 2, who was, as I'm sure you all know, Dean Holland. We must both be in the Book of Deans. Joining Mike Schur on the platform this evening are Meghan Sullivan, the Reverend John A. O'Brien Collegiate Professor in Philosophy and Director of the Notre Dame Institute for Advanced Study. She is also the creator of the God and the Good Life course. I have to say, Meghan, it took me a while to realize that when people talked about GGL, that was what they meant and not some abbreviation for Google. Chris Becker is Associate Professor in the Department of Film, Television and Theatre, and she is, among many other talents, a producer and co-host of the Acamedia podcast, the official podcast for the Society for Cinema and Media Studies, and she runs the amazing Notre Dame Film Society, which screens on Sundays, and if you don't go regularly, you should. What we're going to do is have some questions and discussion up here on the stage, and then turn it over to you for questions from the audience. Plenty of time for you to ask questions. There'll be some roving mics going around. Now, panelists, I want you to think of me as Judge Sean. So if any of you speak emotionally, I will, of course, retreat into my cocoon. It is Sean who, in Series 3, Episode 11, told us, and this matters to me as a Shakespeare scholar, that he spends time torturing William Shakespeare by describing the plot of the Entourage movie. The torture works just as well on panelists, and I will remember this later. So let me ask you what has to be the first question. Can television make us better people? Meghan.
Who came up with this question? This is the worst.
Not me.
So I first saw the Good Place maybe like a week after the pilot came out, and I remember sitting on my big blue couch, being on Facebook, kind of zoning out, and noticing about 5 minutes into the show, oh my gosh, this is a show that is about utilitarianism. Like, they are teaching people about utilitarianism on this TV show. Does anybody know? Like, got on Facebook, immediately started, are you guys seeing this? Have you seen this show, philosophy show yet? One of the things that's really cool about it, and this is going to answer your question, so don't worry. One of the things that's amazing about what Mike has done with this show in particular is even if you've never taken a philosophy class, which is a horrible shame, but even if you've never had the experience of taking a great philosophy class, you're getting, I know, it's a disgrace.
Right, it's the good class.
Some of the key thought experiments, the whole point of philosophy is not learning about what dead people thought about important questions. It's about engaging with those questions yourself. And the way you do it with philosophy is by being posed these challenges that kind of throw you off your keel, that raise new questions about whether you're making the right moral decisions or what kind of decision you would make in this tough scenario. And you watch every episode of The Good Place, and you're getting one of these thought experiments, and you're being tricked into learning the kinds of things that you would learn in a really great moral philosophy class. So you might think, if you've got a show that's able to deliver these thought experiments in concentrated humorous doses once a week to the mass public, that television might make us better people. But that depends on this other assumption that just thinking through the thought experiments makes us better people. Like thinking through the trolley problem and whether you'd kill one person to save 5 people is going to help you on the road to moral improvement. And a bunch of the philosophers that we study think not good enough. You can't just absorb these puzzles and think about it and entertain it in your living room and then feel smart-brained about yourself at the end of it. That's a term we learned from Mike. You've got to do something. You have to have conversations with other people. You've got to apply the thought experiment. So you have to make the jump of watching this trolley problem dilemma with Chidi is kind of similar to whether or not I think the military should sacrifice one person, one innocent civilian, to save a bunch of soldiers. And you've got to wrestle with the real-world implications for your own life of these moral puzzles, which I think one of the super interesting questions for the discussion tonight and for what Mike is trying to do with this show is, are we watching the show and then doing the next thing that it would take to become better people, having these conversations, making the application to the really hard to talk about issues. It's funny to watch Chidi go through a moral dilemma, but it's another thing entirely to try to have these conversations about politics at Thanksgiving with your family. And if we have the bandwidth to do that, then maybe television is making us better people. And if we're not doing that, then maybe we need to change how we approach the medium of television.
All right, gauntlet.
That's what I learned in our class this week.
So from the television perspective, or television studies perspective, I mean, television's #1 job is to make money, full stop, period, right? It's not to make us better people. But I don't think that precludes a potential impact of personal improvement from viewing it. And at the very least, this class has already, we've only had now 3 sessions, but been a lesson in how much joy a show can bring to people. And we can debate tonight, I think, what it means to become a better person. But I like to think finding joy and pleasure in life is part of that and part of making this whole journey worthwhile. And I hope I'm not getting too emotional to bring the cocoon. But another part of it is I also study television, less from what happens when it's out in the world. There are plenty of people who study that kind of thing, and more so how it gets onto the TV screen. And yes, all of those people are employed because they make money for networks and studios and agents and producers and on and on and on. But I also know from firsthand experience of sending graduates out into the industry that a vast majority also have a sincere desire to tell impactful stories, to move audiences, to educate them, to entertain them, to give them joy and pleasure, and then to give themselves creative fulfillment. And again, I think those are all parts of betterment. It doesn't always work. There are tons of forces working against that, and we teach that in television studies as well. But I think there's something to be said for the creative intention and effort, and that's something I'm also looking forward to exploring here today, not just what television can do for all of us, but also what television does for someone like Mike and the people he works with. So I think those are also things to consider.
That set you up.
Yeah.
Well, here's what I would say. I would say that if television can't make us better people, then nothing can, frankly, because television is, like it or not, it's a flawed medium in many ways, but it's also the quintessential, at least American art form of the 20th century and 21st century. There's nothing that American citizens engage with more on a daily basis for more time than television. That's a scary thought, isn't it? But, you know, mass appeal art is incredibly effective at being one of the only things in a sort of fractured world at creating common experiences. When the movie Phantom of the Opera came out, I think it was Phantom of the Opera. Didn't they recently make that in a movie? Cats is coming out, Phantom happened recently. Yeah. Oh no, I'm sorry, it was Les Mis. So Les Mis, this movie comes out of Les Mis, and Les Miserables, and Les Mis ran on Broadway. I think it, at the time, had the record for running the most number of shows on Broadway. And in the opening weekend that the movie was out, more people saw it that day than had seen it combined on Broadway over the course of 20 years, because that theater seats 600 people, and even if it runs every day for 20 years, if you make a movie, you know, 5 million people can see it in one weekend. And the same is true of, even more so actually, television. You know, I was recently told that the total number of people who have watched the pilot episode of The Good Place is 39 million. That includes, obviously, it airing and then being on Netflix for 3 years and having been on Hulu and having been on NBC.com and all the other crazy places where TV shows are available. 39 million people have seen that half hour of television. So if it has no effect on the populace, on the people who are watching it, A, we're screwed as a people, because it's the only thing that can do that. And B, why are people engaging with it so much? If they're not getting anything out of it but entertainment, I don't think that people would continue to watch it as much as they do. So Meghan would say that, like most philosophers would tell you, that it doesn't matter, you can't try to become a good person. One of our philosophical advisors is a woman named Pamela Hieronymi. She teaches at UCLA. She's coming to the campus in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And I met with her when I was first working on the show, and I was like, here's what I want to do. I want to do this show, and I sort of explained the basic way it would work. And she said, there's one fundamental problem with your idea, and it's that you can't try to become a better person. It doesn't work. And I was like, what do you mean? And she was like, it just doesn't work. Philosophers would tell you that it doesn't work. And I was like, well, did any philosophers think that you could try to become a better person? And she was like, I mean, Aristotle. And I was like, great, I got one. I got one. That's all I need. I need one to justify this idea. So, but I think that that's on an abstract level. I think on a practical level, any art form that millions and millions and millions of people are engaging with on average 6 to 8 hours a day, every day, that has the ability to do something. And I think the show's argument and my personal argument would be that it can make you a better person, and that's the explicit goal of this show. So again, if I'm wrong, this whole last 4 years of my life has been for nothing.
I'm so sorry. We'll get to the vote on whether it's been for nothing later. What happens if we flip the question? In one sense, you flip the question and it looks much easier. Can television make you a worse person?
Oh, of course. Are you kidding? Oh, it's doing that all the time.
Yeah.
Yes, television is excellent in making people worse. Most things that are on television, if you watch them, will make you a worse person, I think. I believe that. I would say 80%, call it 80 to 90% of things that are on television, just the act of watching them will make you worse. I'm not kidding. Television is a terrible thing. It's a very powerful weapon, and much of the business of television, to your point, is aimed solely at a sort of financial transaction. If I can do something that will make people watch this more, then I can raise the ad rate at which I sell ads, and I will make more money as a television producer. What a bad incentive system that is. I believe that where you come from, I'm assuming, based on your accent, your system of...
South Bend.
South Bend, Indiana. I guess touche, I was wrong. No, the system of news, for example, in other countries, the news media largely is state-supported, which means it's government-supported, which means it is taxpayer-supported, and it is essentially non-profit, much of it. Some of it isn't, but most of it is. Can you imagine the difference in news coverage in this country if it were a non-profit industry? I mean, so much of every news channel on every side of the aisle in every direction is sensationalized in order to make money. And that's terrible. The whole point of the news media is it is supposed to just present, it's supposed to look around and say, here's what's happening, and present it to you straightforwardly for information, not for money. And the number of individual times that I have watched any number of different news stations in this country and seen something that was purely, obviously gained or aimed at profiteering, it's constant, it's wall to wall, and that's a terrible situation, I think. That's a very dire situation for a republic and for a democracy to have news be weaponized for money. So yes, television is better at nothing more than making people bad. It's excellent at it, and it's a huge problem. And it's not exaggerating to say that the shows that I've done have attempted in some way to be a tiny, largely ineffective countermeasure to the idea that this thing that I believe in as an art form and as a public service, it's been corrupted, and it's not even been corrupted. To say it's corrupted means it's not being used for its intended purpose. It is. It was intended to make money, so it hasn't been corrupted. It's just been weaponized. And I have tried my whole career to aim at the opposite outcome. I don't know to what extent I've been successful, and I'm not alone. There's a lot of people who feel that way and would say that it's important that there be people who are making television that is intended to do good instead of evil.
But your record shows that you can do that and make money.
Well, thank you, yes.
But not only you, but also the organizations for which you make the programs.
It's just a medium, right? It's not, you can use it for anything you want, and as long as it becomes economically viable for the people who are making it. And so there's nothing to say that it has to be used for evil. There's nothing to be said that you have to use it to make terrible reality shows that exploit people, or very lowbrow shows that, or sort of like prurient shows that traffic in extreme violence towards women, and there are dozens and dozens of those. You don't have to do that. That will work because people in the world are scared, and there is a certain kind of a show that's been very popular over the last, say, 20, 30 years that says the world is really scary, but we're going to present a group of superheroes who can keep you safe.
Yep.
And those superheroes might be detectives who can examine the tiniest strand of hair, one strand of hair dropped in one place, and they can solve the crime of the serial killer, and they can protect the world from evil invaders or whatever. And those shows, not in all cases, but in many cases, are using extraordinary violence, usually toward women, to make you more scared, and then to make you watch their shows, and then to make themselves more money. I find that distasteful and unpleasant to watch and to engage in, and so you can use it for that, but you don't have to. And I think more people maybe shouldn't use it for that.
Chris, do you want to come back on to think further about this problem? Because, Mike, what you're describing particularly, you mentioned reality shows, you mentioned action, let's save the universe before the universe is blown up by evil genius number 97. You didn't mention in that comedy, which can also be reinforcing those stereotypes and notions of violence and all kinds of other things. Chris, I just wondered about how you think about this as a trajectory across the history of television.
Yeah. Well, and often television is so much and so many things, and that idea is like television is good or television is bad. There are so many things to that and so many categories within that. And even within those categories, like you can find problematic things like good examples of reality television, bad examples, and good and bad of this. And you could do the same thing with novels, but when you say novel, you think of a fancy book by an important writer that's intellectually important. A lot of times with television, it's like, oh, that's the crappy stuff. And so I think that's part of it, and that's part of like what we try to do in TV studies is respect the entire spectrum of things. And also another thing that comes to mind is the notion of one thing we try to equip our students with is media literacy. Understanding where these images have come from, who produced them, why they were produced, who was behind the camera, who was producing it, what network, what studio, all of those kinds of things, because the better you understand what you are seeing and how it was formed, the more you are empowered to then you could watch something and not be, and this sounds too, I don't know, susceptible is the word I want to use. I don't quite mean it that way, but the more you have a handle on understanding where those images have come from, the more you're equipped to essentially kind of properly use them in a certain way in your everyday life. So that's part of what I think is the purpose of television studies.
Meghan, philosophy as a discipline is not noticeable for its sense of humor.
What?
It may be amongst other philosophers.
We were talking about this earlier, actually. No, go ahead.
Well, I was going to ask, would you ever have expected that the space in which the good place can make an intervention through comedy is towards a response to and an understanding of philosophy as an intellectual discipline?
I mean, I will say I'm shocked that the show works. This is why it's totally awesome that this works, and it's making a lot of philosophers feel great about their job prospects. Because you're right, we're not usually. There's a joke like a philosopher sits down on an airplane, and the person asks them what their job is, and they say philosopher, and they're supposed to say, oh, what are your sayings? I never get that on airplanes. When I sit down on airplanes next to somebody and they ask me what my job is and I say philosopher, I hated that class. Just like high level, jargony, boring, dry. And that is probably the stereotype. And that's true. A lot of philosophy books are not like a laugh a minute, mostly because they're pretty dense. But there have been, going back to Socrates, we were talking about this at the hotel earlier. Socrates is really funny. That's what got him killed, is he was going around provoking people. He was making people who thought that they were really smart feel stupid, and he was doing it in a public way. People were laughing at those politicians and doctors because they didn't know what they were talking about. And you can totally see the spirit of Socrates in somebody like Stephen Colbert, or in shows like The Good Place, certainly in like top like political satire right now that's provocative. And it's the reason that it works as satire is because it's asking the hard question that's making people uncomfortable, but then lightening up on the pressure just at the right time. And that's also what got Socrates killed, is he just forgot to take his foot off the gas at the right time. So I think, there's definitely an element to the tradition of philosophy, at least the last like 2,400 years, that plays on humor to try to get people to talk about something that's really uncomfortable. A lot of writings on death, I think, also you have to play with humor to get somebody to stick with the argument long enough because it's just so devastating to think about normally. There's an interesting question. This is one we gave the students. There's a really wonderful paper by this living philosopher at UNC named Susan Wolf called Moral Saints, which I don't know if you've read it, Mike, but you've read everything, so I wouldn't be surprised. She basically argues that anybody who was trying to be as moral as possible would not be a good person. Like, you wouldn't want to be their friend. You definitely would never invite them to a dinner party because partially they would be incapable of having a sense of humor. Anybody who'd gone like full throttle into the moral life or like totally committed themselves would end up like Doug Forsett, if you've seen season 3, which you should have. But would just end up living a kind of joyless existence of really trying to strictly follow the rules, and the moral demands that life places on us can be just so overwhelming that they make it impossible for you to have a self, and certainly impossible for you to tell jokes or go on misadventures. And one of the things that I love about virtue ethics, and I love about the direction that the show has taken, is certain moral codes are like that. They just put you in the straitjacket and they don't leave any room for you to be wacky or weird anymore. But the Greeks totally thought that was a part of the good life. Misadventures and drunken dinner parties.
They're always drunk, yeah.
They're always drunk. And thinking that whatever the truth, there is a truth out there about what it is to lead a great life. This is part of it, and you practice what you preach. Like, you have to have really funny jokes if you really believe that, and you also really have to believe it and own it.
When I was first researching the show, I just put myself through a course of study of whatever I could find. Like, I just read everything, and when you start reading this stuff, one thing leads you to another thing, to another thing, to another. It just goes on forever. You can read until you die. And I came across the way I got to Pam Hieronymy, actually, who's a professor at UCLA, was I read a paper written by a colleague of hers who argued essentially that the number of moral choices that we have to make every day of our lives is so great, and the inevitability of failure when you make those moral choices is absolute, not just high probability, but an absolute probability that you will fail as a moral agent when you make those choices. And since you do not get a say in whether you want to be born to the earth, it is immoral to have children. You shouldn't have kids. We should all stop having kids because it's not fair to them, because they're going to become grown-ups and make a bunch of moral choices, and they'll fail, and the pain, the psychic pain and the emotional pain of failure at making a moral choice is so great that it's not fair to them because they didn't get to weigh in on whether they want to be born, so we should stop having kids and everybody should die. So I read that, and then I thought, well, this is a comedy show. So I have to keep reading until I find a way to make this funny. I mean, obviously that is unintentionally a very funny paper. Yeah. Like it's a very funny conclusion to come to. And we were talking about Peter Singer recently. Peter Singer is a utilitarian, teaches at, is he Cambridge? Oh, he's at Princeton, right? And Peter Singer is an extremely strict utilitarian to the point where he has calculated an amount of money that it takes in each country, basically, to live a decent life, and that means rent and food and clothing and shelter, and you get a bonus of a little extra money if you have a child or whatever. And he basically says that this is the amount of money it takes to live, and every dollar that you make that's more than that, you don't need, and you should give it to someone who needs it. That leads to some very funny conclusions, right? Because it's like, well, I love my dog. He'd be like, get rid of the dog, right? Get rid of the dog. You don't need it. And you're valuing, if you're spending $1 on dog food, and there's a person in West Africa who who's going to die of malaria unless he gets a malaria net to cover his cot because he sleeps outside. And he needs a malaria net to keep mosquitoes away or he'll die of malaria. And if you spend $1 on dog food, you could use that $1 to buy a malaria net and save a human life, and you're valuing your dog at more than that human life. And it's kind of compelling. Like it's kind of traps you in this weird thing where you're like, I have this really comfy blanket that I really like, and it costs $80, and that's like 16 human lives. Like, I don't know. It's you look around your house and you start thinking like all of this is I'm murdering people is what you think. So there are ways in which the discipline leads to very funny conclusions. It's just that the people who thought of them maybe didn't think they were funny, and so the show has attempted to sort of like traffic in that, right? If you watch the show, I said this earlier, but Eleanor Shellstrop's reactions to learning each new philosophy are sort of mine. Like you can follow my self-education in this discipline through watching her learn stuff from Chidi. And for example, she learns about utilitarianism, and Chidi says, it's very simple. You do the thing that leads to the best result. So you do the right action is the one that leads to the most good and the least bad. And her reaction is like, love it, nailed it. This one's simple, I get it. I don't have to do a lot of reading. I love this one, let's go with this one. And he says, well, there's a problem because it leads to some bad conclusions. Like you could torture one innocent person to save 5 people. Is that fair? And she's like, God damn it. And that was my reaction as I read through the 25-year, 100-year history of philosophy. It was a continual feeling of like, this one seems right. And then learning, no, there's a lot of problems with it. It turns out a lot of problems with everything. So,
well, and someone has to say it, and this is why we hate moral philosophy.
I know.
Professor.
There you go.
Someone had to say it.
It's just a gift that keeps on giving. I'm still trying to imagine that moment when you try pitching the show. And
yeah.
Right, so I'm going to make a series which is a comedy, and I've been good at making this happen before, and my track record is good, and this one's going
Remember
to be...
the other things I did.
Yeah.
Remember that, keep that in your brain.
And they were pretty serious, but not half as serious. This is going to be about philosophy and how to live a good life, and you're 12 seconds into the pitch and you've lost them completely.
Well, to their credit, no. They're very smart people, the people who run the studio that pays me and the network that ultimately pays them. They're very smart people, and just to back up for 1 second, they made a terrible decision to basically give me a guaranteed season of TV, whatever I wanted. They said, whatever you want to do. And I was very grateful, but I also thought this is a thing that most people don't get, right?
Yeah.
You don't. Most people you have to make a pilot, and you have to sell it, and you have to tell them about it, where the show is going to go, and you have to do a lot of legwork, and you have to hope that people like the pilot. And they let me skip the line because I had done other things for them that they liked and which had made them money. So I felt like I sort of owed it to the concept of writing to do something weird. Like, I had been working on TV shows that amounted to a collection of goofballs in an office working together in sort of an ensemble way. And I've been doing some version of that for 10 straight years. And I thought, well, I could do that again. I know how to do that. But now they've given me this other chance to kind of do whatever I want. And I really felt like it sort of was incumbent upon me to take a big swing. So I did. I may have lost them completely after 12 seconds, but it was too late. There was nothing they could do. But honestly, I pitched it as a show about what it means to be a good person. And that's a lot less scary than saying this is a show about dead people who read moral philosophy. And they liked it. And also, it should be noted, I got Ted Danson and Kristen Bell to be in it. And when you get Ted Danson and Kristen Bell to be in the show, they will let you do whatever you want. So to their credit, they never flinched. They understood it. They could see it. didn't just pitch the show. When I pitched it to them, I pitched the entire first season, because it was a constant series of moments of thinking of what ironically, because of the show, I kept thinking, what do I owe this person? What do I owe to this person? Yes. Later, I hadn't read Tim Scanlon's book, What We Owe to Each Other. It would later become the kind of spine of the entire show, but I kept thinking, well, I owe it to other writers, frankly, and to the idea of writing to come up with a big swing. And then once I decided that, I thought, well, what do I owe to the people who are paying me? I owe them not just a single idea or a pilot idea, but I owe them an explanation of how this whole show is going to work. I owe them the relative comfort of knowing that I have a plan, because it might be a scary idea to execute for them if I didn't have a plan. So I kept sort of taking stock of what I owed and to whom, and that made it easier to navigate what could have been a much dicier process.
It's funny because what you're describing sounds like an episode in The Good Place.
It does, yeah.
In which there's a plan, and then what is my obligation, having been given the opportunity to plan? What is the architect's obligation, having been given the opportunity to design a city, a community, a place?
There are many wonderful things about having made this show for 4 years. There are also many drawbacks, and one of the drawbacks is that I have become Chidi-esque in my life, to the point where when a relatively simple dilemma arises in my life, and I go, well, hang on a second, my wife's eyes roll back so far in her head that I can hear it. But that is, I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's bad if you get to the level that Chidi is at, where it literally paralyzes him. But I don't think it's a bad thing to take another 2 minutes at some important moment in your life and just sort of consider, what is the decision I'm making? Why am I making it? Could I make a decision that's better? And if so, what's that decision? I do that a lot more now than I used to. I used to do it a lot because I just did. I'm a sort of deliberate person, but I do it all the time now. And I really do feel like that is a huge part to me of being a better person, is in a moderate way, nothing in excess, in a moderate way, second-guessing yourself, second-guessing what you're doing and why you're doing it, and just taking a second to think if there's a better option.
Obviously, the answer to how we get television to be more open to shows that have intelligence and thoughtfulness and are still extremely funny is for every studio executive to take courses in philosophy.
Yes.
And Meghan would, of course, offer them immediately.
Can we start by asking them to take courses in television production?
Well, that's the other possibility. So how do we make sure not only that television is making people better if it can, but that we make better television? And is there a medium place for television? Because there's an awful lot of bad place for television. Chris, do you want to think it first? No. Yeah.
How are we going to fix television, Mike? How are you going to fix it mostly?
Well, so, okay. There's two parts of my answer to that question. The first is practical. Television is not dissimilar from like an ancient culture's oral tradition of storytelling. The job of being a showrunner is very weird and specific. It is so weird it is not even credited in the credits that run after a TV show. There's no credit that says showrunner, but it's the most important job on any TV show. And the reason, I don't know why there's no credit that says showrunner, but it's just a very weird job. So here's a very standard trajectory for what a showrunner is a standard trajectory is you go to Hollywood or New York and you get your first job as a staff writer on a TV show, and you have no idea what you're doing, and you stink at the job, and hopefully the show sticks around, or maybe it doesn't, but then you get a second job and you're like at a story editor level, and then maybe it's a decent show and it's around for a couple years and you move up the ladder a little bit. And now you're, let's say, 26 or 27, and you've worked in TV for like 3 years, and you've written a couple episodes, and you have an idea for a pilot, and you are like, ooh, this is interesting, and you write the pilot and show it to people, and they go, oh, this is really good, and then like boom, 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 boom. You sell it and to a network, and they love it, and they cast it, and they make the pilot, and then they go to Orlando to a shopping mall, and they throw it in front of 100 people, and the 100 people really like it, and it gets high test scores. And then what happens is a network goes to that 27-year-old person and says, here's $100 million, hire 200 people, and make an entire season of this idea. And if that person, if that 27-year-old hasn't been paying very close attention to every aspect of every job that she has had in that short window of time, she will probably fail at that job, because nothing at all prepares you to spend $100 million of other people's money making an entire season of television. Nothing prepares you for that. And so the only way that it works is if you, A, pay very close attention to the people who are teaching you or passively or actively how to do the job. And again, if you're a 23-year-old who just got your first job and you can pay rent and you're so happy that you have enough money to fly home on some weekend to surprise your grandma for her 80th birthday or something, the last thing you're doing is thinking long-term, I should be really focusing on the mechanics of like the production process. Why in the world would you pay attention to that? All you want to do is write jokes. And so the only way that it's a successful process is if there is what amounts to an oral tradition, what amounts to you have to sit at the feet of someone very smart and wise, and you have to ask them a million questions, and they have to be patient enough, and this is very rare, to answer those questions, so that by the time you luck into that situation where it's time for you to spend $100 million of someone else's money, you actually know how to do it. I got very lucky in that regard. First of all, I worked at Saturday Night Live, and there's a bunch of people who have been there forever, and there's a lot of institutional knowledge about how the show is run. And then I worked at The Office, and Greg Daniels, who adapted that show, is a very professorial gentleman who spent a lot of his time. That first year, the only writers on the show were me, Mindy Kaling, and BJ Novak. The three of us had written a sum total of 0 half-hours of television in our lives. And he very, very patiently essentially taught a class on storytelling, on script writing, on TV production, on editing, all that sort of stuff. He didn't have to do that. He just did it because that's what he likes to do. And so when we got to the point where someone was throwing money at us to make a show, we actually had an idea of what to do. That's very rare. So when you ask the question, like, how do you make better television, a lot of it doesn't have to do with the medium of television. It doesn't have to do with the ideas. It has to do with there being a system in place to actually teach people how to do it. And then here's the second prong. I didn't forget about the second prong. The second prong is right now, that first prong is running out of control. It is running rampant because there are more places making more TV than ever before. They're taking more risks and spending more money on ideas from more people. And so now if you're a 23-year-old, there's a whole new problem, which is from the minute you get your first job, you're thinking, how do I get the hell out of here and get into my own show? And the chances are, like, if you write a script, there's never been more of a chance that it will work. So now you have people taking over this really weird job that no one prepares you for, even in the best of circumstances, and you're getting that job when you have absolutely no business getting that job. And I know that I sound kind of like a crotchety old guy saying these kids today, what with their phones and whatnot, but it's really true, and it doesn't have to do with like longing for a better age, because I believe the age we're in now is better than it was when I started. But it does have to do with this weird quirk of the job that no one teaches you how to do it unless you're actively seeking out to be taught. And that is a very rare thing. And so I fear that there will be, that in this, the amount of television has gone like this, right? And what you would hope for is that the good stuff has also expanded. But my fear is that the good stuff is going to stay the same. And actually, in terms of the actual number of shows that are good and well run and have good ideas behind them, and the mediocrity is going to increase. And that's a bummer, because now the business of television has caught up to the ideas and can sustain more ideas. And it would be a shame if not enough people learned how to do the weird job in order to succeed when they get their good ideas in front of an audience.
I'm trying to work out which member of the panel with a paycheck flew home to surprise their grandmother for their 80th birthday. Sorry. We come to the fork in the evening, and I do mean fork in our sense, not in the good place sense of the word, where we're going to turn for questions from the audience. And we have some plants for the first 3 questions.
No pressure.
No pressure on you. And so if we can have a mic down to here, please.
And while we're waiting for that, I'll just throw in another way to improve television is for more Notre Dame graduates to go into television. And students who have had television production courses and philosophy courses and theology and calculus and all kinds of things. So, there.
You're each going to ask a question, one after the other, and then the panel can select from amongst those 3 questions how they answer or combine them together.
Oh, wow.
No pressure.
I was wondering, in addition to just being a funny show, how much of the interest and success of it you think comes from sort of this era we're in where ethics are kind of in the headlines for not the best reasons, but they're out there, and also just sort of people questioning the systems and how their choices play a role in those systems continuing?
Okay, and I'm not supposed to answer that.
Not
We're supposed to wait.
answered yet.
You got to remember all of them.
You'll be tested on them later. This will be on the test.
So when you made The Good Place, as you mentioned a little earlier, I think you were given this amazing opportunity to take like your very original vision for a show and turn that into, a finished product. But, in order to do that, you have to work with, an entire team of writers, and beyond that, cast and crew, production designers, etc. So as a film student, I find it a lot of the time difficult to collaborate on creative work, especially like that. So I'm wondering, what are the challenges of doing that kind of creative collaboration, and what do you think it brings to the show as a whole?
Okay, ethics, A, collaboration, B, okay.
So my question is, in season 3, Chidi and Simone work on a joint neuroscience and philosophy project. So when answering life's big questions, which area of thought do you like to turn to? Is it philosophy, neuroscience, religion, or something else, and why?
All right, what do I do now?
Yeah.
You
Now you
can
can say whatever you
decide
want.
which direction you want to go.
You can also just answer a question that wasn't even asked.
Yeah.
Where am I from? Ann Arbor, Michigan. That's true, by the way. I apologize. Okay. Collaboration. Collaboration is my favorite part of my job. I'll start by saying that. I find it inspiring and wonderful and vital to the process by which I personally work. That's not going to be true for everybody. No one can collaborate with David Lynch, right? No one, why would you try? Like, Mark Frost collaborated with him, but I think he collaborated with him by being like, okay, David Lynch is going to do his thing, and then I will try to shape it into something that could actually be filmed. But sometimes David Lynch he makes movies, and he doesn't collaborate with anybody, and anybody collaborating with him would dilute the process by which we get David Lynch films, and I don't want anyone to dilute the process by which we get David Lynch films. So nothing says you have to collaborate with people. Other writers. You do have to collaborate with other artists, production designers, and costume designers and stuff. But that collaboration, like there is a benevolent dictatorship version of a TV show or a movie where it's just, this is my vision, please help me execute my vision, and if it doesn't match my vision, I'm gonna ask you to try to, fall in line. That's okay, as long as you're treating the people that you're saying that to respectfully. If you're ranting and raving and stomping your foot and screaming at people and firing them for their miserable failure, that's not okay. Although there's a whole lot of people in Hollywood who've gotten real rich doing that, but I don't recommend it just as a way to live. So there's nothing that says you have to collaborate with other artists or writers in terms of like executing an idea or conceiving of an idea. You do have to collaborate with a lot of other people to make anything good, unless you are doing a one-woman show about Mark Twain or something, and you're playing him and you're doing all your own makeup. In that case, go crazy. Also, by the way, I would love to see that show. That'd be great. But I think that the only thing that is required of you or is incumbent upon you is to treat people respectfully. And as long as you're doing that, then you can execute, if you want to execute a singular vision, execute a singular vision. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. That was B. C was, what discipline do I fall back on when answering these questions? I don't know anything about neuroscience.
That's the next project.
That's right, that's the next show. But we had a character in season 3 named Simone, and in season 4, who is a neuroscientist, and we designed that character. And then we were like, there has to be a human being somewhere on Earth who knows about both neuroscience and philosophy. And we found one, whose name is Joshua Green, who's a professor at Harvard, who wrote a book called Moral Tribes. And we consulted him. He was a consultant on season 3 of the show. And we sort of asked him, like, if you were going to do an interdisciplinary study in combining philosophy and neuroscience, what would it look like? And he was very helpful and helped us sort of design that aspect of the show. I found the process of reading philosophy for this show to be wonderful and exhilarating and so annoying, just so annoying, and painful and sad and miserable and great and so fun, you guys, but it's also really awful. And mostly what I've really liked about it is I knew a very small amount about the subject and just decided to try to learn more. And I have that feeling about a number of things. One of them is neuroscience. I knew this much, and now I know this much. But I think the joy for me is learning about something new, something that I don't know anything about. I didn't know anything about local government when we started Parks and Recreation, and I went and met with a lot of people who work in local government, and their stories are fascinating. If any of you, if you've watched the show Parks and Recreation, there's a character in Parks and Recreation named Ron Swanson, and right. So you know who Ron Swanson is. So we had this idea. Greg and I had this idea for a person who worked in local government who was a libertarian and believed that the government should be dismantled and thrown away. And we thought that was really funny, but it was like, well, that's not believable, right? So we went to this local government near where we live in LA, and we were speaking with this woman who was very lovely, and she was showing us around and telling us how things work, and we said, listen, we have this idea for this character who actively works in local government, but also believes that, is a libertarian and believes that government should be literally dismantled and thrown in the garbage. Is that just too silly to work? And she said, no, I'm a libertarian. And we kind of stared at her, and she went, I'm aware of the irony. And so we're like, all right. So it turned out there is nothing that you can propose about local government that is too absurd to be true. So that was also exhilarating to meet people that I didn't know anything about their lives, and I learned about their lives, and then we infused the show with that stuff. So I think the more important thing in terms of having one thing that I would fall back on is the idea of learning about new things. I think that's more fun. And I forget question A. Oh, ethics. I got it.
Yeah.
So this show was conceived of in early 2016, and I wrote the pilot, and we did a lot of the work for the first season in early 2016 before the presidential election of 2016, and I thought we were doing something that was completely abstract, and that was that the idea of a show about ethics, specifically and ethical behavior and what it meant to be a good person through the lens of ethical behavior was just a piece of art floating in the universe. And then over the course of the next 3.5 years, the word ethics has appeared on the front page of every major newspaper on more days than it has not. And that was completely coincidental. So I think it's been really interesting to make this show in this era. It was completely unintended. It did not set out to be any kind of commentary on the current political situation or the current socio-economic situation of America or anywhere else. It just happens to have weirdly dovetailed with national events. So, I mean, that's not bad. I think that's good. But luckily for us, we realized our characters are all dead. And so they don't know anything that's going on Earth, and as a result, they can't comment on it. And we wanted to avoid the current political climate anyway, because the current political climate has very little, frankly, to do with the history of philosophy. And we wanted to avoid it anyway, and then we had a loophole for how to avoid it, which was they're all dead and they don't know anything about what happened. So we avoided it until, basically until right up into the present day, we've avoided talking about American politics.
Well, then I have a quick follow-up, because your show, which premieres in 2 weeks or a week, deals with immigration. And so it seems like that will be...
Yes, I found another outlet for how to comment on America. Although that show, yes, the show Sunnyside, that Cal Penn is starring in, that I didn't create, I'm producing it. My friend Matt created it, who was a writer on Parks and Rec and The Good Place. It's not overtly, I mean, it is a political show just because immigration is a political football that's tossed around a lot, but the show itself is attempting simply to tell stories about people who want to get their citizenship from a bunch of different places, they have a bunch of different backgrounds, and it is not, our goal is to never say the word Trump out loud, because it's not, first of all, because I feel like we've heard that word enough, and also because that's not the point of the show. The point of the show is to just tell stories about people who want to get citizenship through a comedic lens, and so we're trying to keep it apolitical as much as we can.
Good luck with that ambition.
Yeah.
More questions from the audience. I'll try and find hands. Somebody just under the gallery. I'm trying to look around. I promise I will be as fair as I can.
Is this on?
Yes.
Okay. First of all, a huge fan. So
Thank you.
How do you balance humor and philosophy? So my favorite episode of The Good Place is the trolley problem. I think you very accurately represent the trolley problem, but you also have this amazing comedic spin on it. How do you continually balance just the seriousness of philosophy with the humor in The Good Place?
The trolley problem to me is inherently hilarious. It's like a very, very serious philosopher said, imagine you're on a trolley and there are 5 people on the tracks and the brakes fail and you can pull a lever and divert the trolley and only kill 1 person. What do? That's hilarious. I mean, what a choice. Like, are you kidding me? There's no third option here? I first heard about the trolley problem in college 100 years ago, and I believe when it was first brought up in the class I was in, I laughed out loud. And it has remained a source of comedy for me forever. And then the more you read about it, the more hilarious it gets, right? The more it's like, well, there's a janitor in a hospital, and there's 5 people who need organ donations. Would you murder this janitor and harvest his organs to implant them in the 5? I mean, what world are we in? First of all, hilarious that you're a doctor. 5 patients come in, one's missing a liver, one's missing 2 kidneys, one's missing a heart, one's missing a brain. Like, what happened in that town that led to this? But I always thought it was funny, and so part of the fun, philosophy, no offense, can be a little trying, a little dry, a little dense, but what's wonderful about philosophy is that occasionally you wade through like 700 pages of impenetrable prose, and then the philosopher will say, like, here's an example, and then they throw out something like the trolley problem, and you're like, why couldn't you have made the whole book this stuff? Because I can understand this. So that, to me, that was what the show was going to be always, was like, I said, when I pitched the show, to go back to this question, I said to NBC, I promise I won't make it feel like homework. And then in the 3rd episode, Chidi is standing at a blackboard and it says Philosophy 101. So I lied to them. But that was what I meant by that, was there are aspects of philosophy, of moral philosophy, that are very funny, and which are phrased and put into context which are inherently comedic. And if we could just get to that moment. I felt, that doesn't come until season 2, but I felt from the beginning, like, if I can make this show last until we get to an episode where we can do the trolley problem, we'll be fine. Because it is so funny. And we talked about this earlier in the other class, but there's like, I don't know, how many varietals of the trolley problem are there? There's hundreds. There's like, it just keeps branching out and branching out and branching out, and people write more and more articles about, like, well, here's another example. And one of them, there's a guy on a boat and there's a volcano erupting on an island, and there's 50 people on the north end of the island and only 1 on the south end. And it's like, where do you go? It's like, well, get away, you're on a boat, get out of there. Get away from the erupting volcano, how about that? So it's easy with stuff like the Charlie Problem. It's harder when you're talking about Tim Scanlon's book, What We Owe to Each Other, which is itself very dry and very hard to sort of get across. But you have a bunch of really funny writers and you have a bunch of really funny actors, and you just figure out ways to write jokes about it. And it was a real challenge for the writers a lot of times. But the Charlie Problem, that was easy, man. Give me 100 Charlie Problems, I'll keep the show on forever.
I'm still having problems with trolley problem number 7, which is where Chidi kills 5 William Shakespeares to save Santa Claus.
That's right, yeah.
Thank you.
We actually had a debate about that. That's a little throwaway joke, but we had a debate of like, well, what would he do? Mm-hmm. And we figured out that he was like, well, I mean, some people don't like Shakespeare. Everyone likes Santa Claus. I guess I'll kill all the Shakespeares.
My career is over. Question down here.
First, on behalf of everyone in the humanities, thank you for giving us street cred with your TV show. It's made a difference. Two-pronged question, philosophy and comedy. Just want to hear you riff on 2 TV shows that I think are really significant in these 2 realms. Philosophy, BoJack Horseman. Doing something very different with philosophy than what you're doing, but would like to hear kind of how you think about the show and its relation to The Good Place. Comedy, a show that is to me basically my second religion, Arrested Development. What do you think that show did?
So you're like an anarchist or something? Would that be your religion?
I'm a never nude. What did that show do to the comedic landscape, and how does comedy after that show does it relate to it, especially in your comedy? What do you think about that? Thank you.
This is going to sound like a cop-out, but I have a moral code, which is I don't like to talk about other comedy shows. I'll happily talk about dramas, but I don't like to talk about comedy shows, even ones I like, wink, wink, because I feel like it's, comedy, people commenting on other comedies is just like it's a bad idea. And also, even if you're talking about shows that you like and you don't, if someone says, what are your favorite comedies that are on the air, and you mention 18 shows, you will forget to mention one that you A, like, and B, your friend works on, and then that friend will call you and say, what the hell, right? So I without commenting specifically on those 2 shows, which I can say I love both of those shows, you're right, they're doing very different things. Arrested Development was for the first time, in the single camera world, so multi-camera shows are ones in front of an audience, right? You can hear the laugh track. Single camera shows, they aren't only shot with one camera, but they're more filmic and there's no laughter. There had been some great multi-camera shows that were sort of experimental and broke the mold, like Seinfeld, for example. Arrested Development was a real watershed in single camera world, which is the way where I live. Because it was the storytelling was so intricate and so complex, and it moved so quickly, and it made a lot of people, including me, feel like greatness was achievable on network television. Like that was a really important moment. The Office came on about a year and a half, I think, after Arrested Development, and I don't know if The Office survives without Arrested Development. I think there's a lot of shows that might not have survived without Arrested Development because it proved that you could make a show half-hour comedy that intricate and complex and layered and multidimensional, and have a cast that big, cast that many talented people in one place and have it work. And so that was a very important show, I think, in the history of, when someone writes the definitive history of TV comedy 2000 to the present, it'll probably start with that show, I think.
Question over here.
Hi, this is not philosophical, sorry, Meghan. But I would just really be kicking myself if I didn't ask, how did the character of Mose get conceived of, and how did you end up playing him?
Oh, don't clap, no. I truly believe I could somehow someday cure esophageal cancer. And when I died, my obituary would say, Michael Schur, who portrayed the Amish neck-bearded, beet-farming Mose on The Office, and also cured esophageal cancer, died today, age of 97. Okay, briefly, part of Greg Daniels started at SNL just like I did, and at SNL all the job titles are sort of indistinguishable. Writers act and actors write, and everybody, it's a big sort of mess. And he believed in the sort of creative power of that idea, and that's why Mindy and BJ and Paul Lieberstein, who played Toby, they all acted on the show. I wasn't a performer, so I didn't perform on the show, and I didn't particularly want to. There was a terrible reality show in probably 2004 or 2005 that was mean-spirited and cruel and awful, called Amish in the City. And the premise of this show was they took 8 meat-headed ding-dongs from LA, just hard-bodied, hot 23-year-old ding-dongs, and they brought them to a house in the Hollywood Hills, and they were like, you guys are gonna live here, and it's gonna be awesome. And then they also took 8, I think, Amish youths on Rumspringa and brought them to the house and said, here are your roommates. And it was awful. It was a train wreck in exactly the way that the producers intended it to be. One of the very lovely, kind, sweet, generous, wholesome Amish youths was named Mose. And he had a very low, odd voice, and he was very sweet, and he made little wooden toys for those new roommates. And they were not, you could imagine, interested in receiving wooden toys from him. And I was complaining about the show and how mean-spirited it was in the room. And Greg pointed at me and went like, you're gonna play Mose. Because it was part of the backstory of the show already that Dwight Schrute had Germanic Amish roots in Pennsylvania, and he was like, he should have a cousin on the beet farm, and it should be you playing Mose. And I was like, ha, ha, ha. And then he sort of like in a hazing way just made me do it. Now, side note, there's one other detail that's important here, which is my natural facial hair growth is a neck beard. I cannot grow hair on my cheeks. All of the men in my family are like this. My mom's brothers can't either. So he noticed, that helped, right? He noticed that my beard was just, and so he made me do it. And the first episode, he made me grow a real beard. He wouldn't even let me, it's really awful behavior on his part. Made me grow a real beard, and we shot the first episode that I had to do it was in a part of the sort of exurbs of LA it's called Disney Ranch. I think it's owned by Disney, and it's this wide open chunk of land with a couple little structures on it where people shoot stuff. It was August something. It was 128 degrees. I had a neck beard. I was wearing wool clothing and like old boots, and I didn't even get to talk. Like they didn't even let me talk. And I hated every second of it. I really did. And then they loved how much I hated it, and so they made me do it again and again and again. They made me do it like 15 times, and I hated it every time. And the more I complained about it, in true like older brother fashion, the more they made me do it. So that's the whole story, and I hated it. Don't clap, no.
I'm now wondering how you work this into the next generation, who it is in The Good Place who's going to go through an ordeal like that.
I mean, I feel like just surviving that experience without murdering all of them gets me in, so.
Question over there.
I'm going to bring it back to philosophy. Just like I also had no experience with philosophy until I took Professor Sullivan's class, and I was like immediately very interested in it. Were you interested in moral philosophy before you came up with the idea for The Good Place, or like did The Good Place inspire you to learn more about moral philosophy?
No, I was interested in it before. I took a couple classes in college, and I really liked it, but I just sort of didn't pursue it that much. And then a number of things happened over the years that cropped up in my life that made me think like, oh, this is a moral philosophy question. Like this is something I could answer if I were smarter or knew more about this subject. And so, and then when I conceived of the idea for the show, the first round of sort of reading I did was about religious conceptions of the afterlife, which are fascinating. All of them are fascinating, and they're all intertwined, and they borrowed from each other in really interesting ways. And and it was great. It was like a really wonderful sort of like month and a half of just indulging in this academic pursuit, and then I realized that the show wasn't about religion, it was about ethics, and I had wasted my time, and I put it away, and then I started a new course of study, which was moral philosophy, and as soon as I started reading it, I was like, yes, this is correct. So I had a baseline interest in it, I think, at a very shallow level, but I didn't really know a whole lot about it. I went to Harvard, and at Harvard there's a very famous class called Justice that a man named Michael Sandel still teaches? Does he still teach?
It's unclear if he's still doing it, but until very recently.
There were two classes that everybody took. One of them was called Justice, and one of them was called Thinking About Thinking, which was Sandel, Robert Nozick, who's a famous philosopher, and Alan Dershowitz. And the idea was they would throw out a topic, and then Nozick would talk about it philosophically, and Sandel would talk about it sort of moral or legally, and Dershowitz, would talk about it legally. And it was basically three guys on stage listening to the sound of their own voices. The joke on campus was, it was called Thinking About Thinking. The joke on campus, it was called Talking About Talking. But everyone took those two classes because it was this sort of big picture, like introduction to all of these ideas. I took neither of them. And I regretted it. As soon as I started doing this reading, I really regretted it because it would have given me a much stronger foundation for reading on my own. Sandel has a book that he wrote called Justice that is a sort of survey of all of the stuff he teaches in the class, which I really enjoyed. I read the book instead of taking the class. And I really enjoyed it. It helped me a lot, sort of like organize the basic thoughts. But no, it's all, the fault of error in the show is mine and not my teachers, I would say.
One last question. Gentleman there.
I just wanted to start by saying thank you because your shows have truly shaped my life, and
Have they made you a better person?
Yeah.
I have gotten into many arguments with
Exhibit
my
A.
mother about it, and I truly feel like I have. But during my first week here at Notre Dame, because I'm a freshman, it was very hard adjusting to campus, and season 3 of The Good Place had just come out on Netflix, so I binged the entire thing, of course, over a weekend. And there's one scene in the finale where Eleanor looks at Janet and says, "So just tell me what it is. Tell me the meaning of life." And she responds with, "When nothing seems to make sense, when you find something or someone that does, it's euphoria." And that has stuck with me throughout my entire time here, and I just want to say thank you for that. But now on a more brighter note.
For the record, when you say it stuck with you for your entire time here, you're a freshman, you've been here like a week.
But it feels like a lot. It feels like a lot.
That is also very true.
It's a lovely sentiment, but you're also like, it's not that lovely.
Very true.
Like get in touch with me in a few years and it's still stuck with you.
If you give me your contact information, I will. But anyway, so your shows feature some of the strongest love stories that I have ever seen, with Leslie and Ben, with Anne and Chris, with Michael and God, Holly. I'm so sorry, I'm a little shaky.
He said Amy, that's the actress's name.
Amy Ryan.
He was on the money.
But what inspired you to bring these powerful love stories to your shows? And also, it would kick me if I didn't ask it, what did Jim write in the letter to Pam in the teapot?
So I was asked that earlier, and I'll give you the same answer. I actually wrote the letter by hand, and I will never tell anyone what it says. It was a long discussion. It wasn't just me coming up with it. There was a long discussion with all the writers and everybody, but we made a sort of blood pact that we would never tell. So to your first question about love stories. So, okay, comedy writing in general is the domain of misfits and weirdos and anxious people and people who are concerned with being cool. And mushy love stories are the opposite of all of those things. Mushy love stories are about sincerity and honesty and openness and vulnerability, and those are all qualities that comedy writers, generally speaking, don't have. And the great risk of writing, of sort of making room in a show for romance, and not just romance, but sort of like unabashed romance, like romance that's just, where I'm not trying to do this in like a cool way. I'm just saying like people on Earth are bumping into each other and they're being vulnerable with each other and they're having moments of openness and honesty and exposing themselves, their souls to each other. That is a thing that most comedy writers and most humans on Earth shy away from because it's scary. It means that you are sort of walking out on a very shaky tree branch and sort of presenting yourself, and you're risking your friends and your cool comedian buddies and your cool LA folks laughing at you and saying like you're lame and you stink and whatever. So but there aren't any good shows without love stories. And there aren't any good books without love stories, I think, at some level. And that doesn't have to mean romantic love, but that means like human vulnerability and the sort of the fear and the risk-taking that comes with being vulnerable around other people. So Greg Daniels, who taught me how to do this job, said from the beginning about The Office, he was like, we are going to take time in every episode to be serious and to make room for that stuff. And it's going to be weird and people aren't going to like it. He told NBC when the show was airing, he was like, people aren't going to like this. They're not going to like the show. Like they're going to, when you test this show, people are going to say it's bad. And he sort of prepared them for it because it was, the show then was groundbreaking in a number of ways. It was a mockumentary, which hadn't been done. It was really slow and deliberate. It had a very downbeat tone to it. It was fluorescent lighting, and it didn't look pretty. And it had this weird inversion where the normal show formula is the love story. The main love story is at the center of the show, and then in the side, in the corner, there's a wacky boss who comes in, and the wacky boss makes some jokes, and then he leaves, and then the audience's focus is on the love story. And the British version of the show, and then the American version of the show, inverted that. And they were like, this whole show is about the wacky boss. And it's about him and what a weird psychological profile he has. And we're going to take this love story, and we're going to shove it into the corner, and you're going to get this much of it every week. That was a very revolutionary idea at the time, and people didn't like it. But Greg's point was, we are never going to do an episode of this show that doesn't have that little piece, that little kind of, that little chunk of time, 15 seconds or 30 seconds or 45 seconds of every episode. It's going to have no jokes, and it's going to be uncool, and it's going to be sincere, and it's going to have a sense of two human beings on Earth relating to each other in a way that's vulnerable and honest and real. And that was a non-negotiable part. Even the dumbest, silliest episodes of The Office have that somewhere in them, and that's just how I was taught. And it seems like a very good formula to me. And so that idea carried into Parks and Rec, and in that case, by the way, I was working with a woman, Amy Poehler, who lives for that stuff. Her whole life and creative career is about like being gushy and gooey and real and kind of vulnerable and funny at the same time. And so you just keep working with people who share that sensibility, and you just reaffirm your commitment every week to saying like, yeah, we're not gonna only be cool and funny and hip. We're gonna elbow out time in every episode we do to make sure that human beings can relate to each other honestly at some point. And at the end of it, you get to the end of 200 episodes of The Office or 125 of Parks and Rec, and you have a real sense of who they are as human beings instead of just ciphers who bounce around and say dumb things. And it matters. I really believe it matters. I think the reason that people like you who are 18 years old are watching The Office, a show about a paper company in central Pennsylvania, is because, it's not because you care deeply about the American paper industry, but because those emotional stories and those emotional connections are so real and tangible, and you feel like they're meaningful to you. So that's just I think that's the best way to do it.
Meghan, Chris, final comments? Anything brief you'd like to add? So not necessarily about The Office.
I would just say thanks. Dean Mastella mentioned this, but Mike has been on campus and pretty much going nonstop since 7:30 this morning with our crew. But it's been totally fantastic to have this conversation, and I think the students who've been participating can verify that you can take something that seems trivial and fun, like a 22-minute sitcom on television, and if you look at it at the right angles and at a place like Notre Dame and with the right kinds of resources, you can stretch it out into like 10-hour nonstop conversation with lots of different angles and still be surprised. Like all of these questions tonight were really surprising. So that's just like, it's cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we've been planning, the class, everything since January. This was, we started with lunch at Allie's, yeah, and just, and Meghan said Mike Schur was coming, and we envisioned, well, what can we do? Like, let's make things happen from this. And this is one of the things I love about Notre Dame, that you can have an idea like this, and everybody is all in, and like, let's do this. So come to classes, we'll do a public talk, we'll have him interact with the second Dean Holland he's interacted with in his life. Like all of these possibilities, and I think that's, we've been planning this for so long, and this has finally gone exactly how we hoped, maybe even better, and so it's so great to see this happen.
So we know that some bits of television, that 10 to 20% that you described at the beginning, might be able to make us better people. I know that sessions like these do. I want to say thank you and bring it to an end, but there is a very special announcement to come from Dean Mastella first.
It's a very special episode.
So scared right now.
Be very afraid.
Before we let Mike return to Los Angeles in the production of his new series, Sunnyside, premiering on NBC on November 26th, following the final season premiere of The Good Place, we have one final task to attend to. Those of you familiar with Parks and Recreation, remember Little Sebastian, a mini horse beloved in Pawnee, Indiana. For those of you who are not familiar, we'll show you a clip. Sadly, Little Sebastian passed away in 2011, but his memory lives on at Notre Dame. In honor of your visit and that mini horse's extraordinary life, we have decided to officially dedicate the popcorn stand in the DeBartolo Performing Arts Center to Little Sebastian. One floor above the Regis Philbin Studio Theater will sit the Lil Sebastian popcorn popper. Please allow me to read the citation. From the University of Notre Dame, the DeBartolo Performing Arts Center hereby declares this, the Lil Sebastian Memorial Popcorn Popper, a life and legacy of delighting crowds from Pawnee to Buckingham Palace to Kuwait, will be honored forever by delighting crowds at the DeBartolo Performing Arts Center with buttery, freshly popped popcorn. Animalis, legendae, amicus, equus Pawnee, perfectum.
That's wonderful. I can't believe that I wrote that joke 7 years ago, and now he actually does have an honorary degree.
Thank you all for being here tonight. Please enjoy the rest of your evening.